On the eve of the largest invasion in history, the order was given, postpone. D-Day was off. All because one man predicted the weather would mean they lose the war. March 1944. In a heavily guarded mansion called Southwick House near Portsmouth, England, a very strange team is being assembled. These aren't soldiers. They're meteorologists. Weather guys. And they've just been given an impossible job. Predict the weather for the biggest invasion in history. An invasion that hasn't been scheduled yet. An invasion that depends entirely on perfect conditions. An invasion where getting the forecast wrong means thousands of dead soldiers and probably losing the war. The man in charge is Group Captain James Stagg. He's 43 years old, Scottish, doesn't smile much, and looks permanently exhausted. People describe him as dour. That's a nice way of saying he's serious and a bit gloomy. One admiral jokes that every time Stagg walks into the room, it's like 6 feet 2 inches of gloom just entered the building. Stagg isn't actually a trained meteorologist. He's a geophysicist. He studies the Earth, not weather. But the military chose him for this job because he can manage people and handle pressure. They gave him a rank of Group Captain in the Royal Air Force just so other officers would respect him. Because here's the thing. Stagg has to manage 3 teams of actual meteorologists, and these teams hate each other. Team 1 is from the British Met Office. 2 guys, Charles Douglas and a Norwegian named Sverre Pettersen. Douglas is cautious, experienced, and believes you can't reliably forecast weather more than a day or 2 ahead. Pettersen is brilliant, confident, and thinks he can see patterns others miss. They're the scientific ones, the careful ones. Team 2 is from the Royal Navy. Commander Geoffrey Wolfe and a New Zealand officer named Lawrence Hogben. They're practical guys who care about waves and wind because their job is keeping ships safe. They think Stagg is kind of useless as a meteorologist and maybe a bit of a glory hound. They don't hide this opinion. Team 3 is the problem. 2 Americans, Irving Crick and Ben Holtzman. Crick used to forecast weather for Hollywood movie studios. He'd tell directors when they could film outdoor scenes. Before the war, he famously predicted good weather for filming the burning of Atlanta scene in Gone with the Wind. He's confident, loud, and believes he can forecast weather up to 5 days ahead by looking at historical weather patterns from the past 40 years. The British teams think this is complete nonsense. Hogben from the Navy calls Crick's methods pure bunk. Pettersen from the Met Office thinks Crick is talking nonsense. But Crick doesn't care what they think. He's sure he's right. So you've got 3 teams that disagree on basic methods, 3 teams that don't like each other, and James Stagg has to somehow get them to agree on a single forecast to give to General Eisenhower. A forecast that will determine when the invasion happens. A forecast that will decide the fate of millions of people. No pressure. The invasion needs very specific weather. The planners have given Stagg a list of requirements that sound impossible. First, they need calm seas. Winds no more than force 4 on the Beaufort scale. That's about 18 miles per hour max. Any stronger and landing craft will capsize. Second, they need low clouds to be above 3,000 feet so bombers can see their targets. Third, they need good visibility so naval guns can aim at German positions. Fourth, they need all of this to happen at dawn, during low tide, with a full moon the night before so paratroopers can see where they're landing. Stagg does the math. In June 1944, there are only 3 days per month when the tides and moon are right. Just 3 days. If the weather is bad on those 3 days, the invasion gets pushed back a whole month. And if it gets pushed back, the Germans might figure out where the Allies are planning to land. The whole element of surprise could be lost. Also, you can't keep 150,000 men sitting on ships indefinitely. They'd run out of food. They'd get sick. Morale would collapse. Eisenhower picks June 5th as D-Day. That gives them June 5th, 6th, and 7th as possible invasion dates before the tides become wrong and they have to wait until July. 3 chances. That's it. The meetings start in May. Twice a day, every day, Stagg and his 6 meteorologists gather. They look at weather maps, they argue, they try to agree on a forecast. Then Stagg has to walk into another room where Eisenhower is waiting with all his top commanders. General Montgomery, Admiral Ramsey, Air Marshal Lee Mallory. These are the guys who'll be leading the invasion, and Stagg has to tell them what the weather will be. For most of May, the weather is perfect, day after day of clear skies and calm seas. Everyone starts to relax. Maybe this won't be so hard. Maybe June 5th will have good weather too. But Stagg knows better. He tells Eisenhower they might have to wait 150 years for perfect weather that would make everyone happy. Weather doesn't work like that. You can't order perfect conditions. You take what you get and hope it's good enough. Late May arrives. The weather is still holding. Beautiful sunny days, warm temperatures, the kind of weather that makes you think summer has arrived and nothing will go wrong. Ships start moving into position. Troops board landing craft. The machinery of invasion begins. Thousands of men packed onto vessels, waiting. The first ships leave Scottish ports on May 31st. These are the old cargo ships that will be deliberately sunk off the Normandy coast to create artificial breakwaters. They have to leave early because they're slow. Once they leave, there's no turning back easily. June 1st. Still beautiful. Stagg's teams meet, and their forecasts all basically agree. Weather should hold for the next few days. Good. Everything is going according to plan. June 2nd. Maureen Flavin, the young Irish woman at Blacksod Lighthouse, sends her routine weather report to Dublin. The Irish Met Service has a secret agreement with Britain. Even though Ireland is neutral in the war, they share weather data. They've been doing it since 1939. The British desperately need this data because Ireland is the last piece of land before the Atlantic Ocean. Weather systems come from the west. If you want to know what's coming toward Britain, you need to know what's happening in Ireland. Maureen doesn't know any of this. She just takes her readings every few hours and sends them on. Pressure steady, wind calm. Everything normal. June 3rd. Maureen's 21st birthday. She's working the overnight shift. Around 1 a.m., she checks the barometer. It's dropping. Not slowly. Fast. She checks again an hour later. Still dropping. By dawn, the pressure has fallen significantly and rain is starting. She records everything and phones it to Dublin. On the other end, an Irish meteorologist sees these numbers and immediately forwards them to the British Met Office at Dunstable. This is bad. A rapidly falling barometer in Western Ireland means a major storm system is building over the Atlantic. And it's heading east, toward the English Channel. At Southwick House, Charles Douglas and Sverre Petterson from the British Met Office see Maureen's report. They look at other data coming in. A weather ship 600 miles west of Ireland is reporting rough seas and falling pressure. Another weather station is seeing the same pattern. The pieces start coming together. A depression, a big one, moving fast across the Atlantic. It's going to hit the British Isles in the next 24 to 36 hours, which means it will be sitting right over the English Channel on June 5th. D-Day. Petterson starts drawing weather maps, plotting the storm's path. The more he looks at it, the worse it gets. This isn't a light rain system. This is a serious Atlantic storm, the kind that brings force 6 winds. Heavy rain, low clouds, rough seas. Everything the invasion planners said they couldn't accept. He calls Douglas over. They both stare at the map. They have to tell Stagg, and Stagg has to tell Eisenhower. But here's the problem. Irving Crick, the American meteorologist, doesn't see it the same way. Crick is looking at his historical weather patterns. In his analysis, storms like this move quickly. They blow through fast. Yes, June 5th might be rough, but June 6th should be fine. The storm will have passed. His forecast says go ahead with the invasion. Maybe delay one day, but it's not a big deal. The British teams think Crick is insane. Hogben from the Navy looks at sea conditions and says there's no way ships can safely operate in these winds. Petterson from the Met Office says the storm will stall over the channel, not blow through quickly. They're looking at the same data and reaching completely opposite conclusions. It's late evening on June 3rd. Stagg meets with all 6 meteorologists. The argument gets heated. Crick insists his forecast is right. The British insist Crick is wrong. Nobody will budge. They argue for hours. Stagg has to somehow create a consensus forecast out of this mess. But there is no consensus. Half his team says the weather will be terrible. The other half says it will be acceptable. Stagg makes a decision. He trusts the British teams more than Crick. Their analysis seems more grounded in current conditions rather than historical patterns. He's going to tell Eisenhower the weather looks bad. Really bad. Bad enough that the invasion might need to be delayed. 9:30 p.m. on June 3rd. Stagg walks into the conference room at Southwick House. Eisenhower is there with all his commanders. They're expecting good news. The weather has been perfect for days. Why would it change now? Eisenhower looks at Stagg and asks what he's got for them. Stagg takes a breath. He says the whole weather situation from the British Isles to Newfoundland has been transformed. It's now potentially full of menace. The officers look confused. Some glance out the window. It's a beautiful evening. The sun is setting. The sky is clear. It's still light outside because Britain is on double daylight saving time during the war. What is Stagg talking about? Eisenhower asks about June 6th and 7th. What will the weather be like on those days? Stagg pauses. He knows if he guesses wrong, he could be responsible for a catastrophe. He looks at Eisenhower and says, "If I answered that, sir, I would be guessing, not behaving as your meteorological advisor." That's not what Eisenhower wants to hear, but it's honest. The meeting ends. No decision yet. Eisenhower says they'll meet again in the morning. Stagg and his deputy, Colonel Donald Yates, walk back to their tents. The sky is clear and everything is quiet. Stagg knows that by morning, the weather will have changed. He hopes his forecast is right. Because if it's not, if the weather stays perfect and he's crying wolf, Eisenhower might not trust him again when it really matters. June 4th, 4:15 a.m. Stagg walks back into the conference room. The weather has turned. The storm Maureen Flavin predicted is arriving. Wind is picking up. Clouds are rolling in. Rain starts falling. Stagg tells the commanders his fears from yesterday have been confirmed. For the next 3 to 4 days, the weather will be rough. Force 6 winds, low clouds below 3,000 feet. Heavy seas, everything the invasion can't tolerate. The room goes quiet. Everyone is processing what this means. They've been planning this invasion for years. Tens of thousands of men are already on ships. Some ships have already left port and are sailing toward France. And now they're being told the weather will make it impossible. Eisenhower sits there, not moving. He has to make a decision. If they go ahead with the invasion and the weather is as bad as Stagg says, landing craft will flip. Bombers won't be able to see through the clouds. Naval guns won't hit their targets. Men will drown. The invasion could fail before it even starts. But if they postpone, there's a logistical nightmare. How do you tell thousands of ships to turn around? Some won't get the message. Some are too far out to recall. And every day they wait, the chance of German spies figuring out the plan gets higher. Eisenhower makes the call. Postpone. Send out the recall messages. D-Day is delayed 24 hours to June 6th. The room erupts in controlled chaos. Staff officers rush out to send messages. But there's an immediate problem. One convoy doesn't get the message. Convoy U-2A. About 150 ships carrying the 4th Infantry Division. They left from Plymouth and are heading straight for Utah Beach. Nobody can reach them. The radio messages aren't getting through. By the time anyone realizes this convoy hasn't acknowledged the recall, they're already 30 miles from France. They're hours away from landing on a defended beach all by themselves with no support. Panic. Destroyers are sent to chase them down. Aircraft are launched to search. Finally, a walrus biplane spots the convoy. The pilot drops 2 message canisters. The second one is retrieved. The convoy acknowledges and turns around just 36 miles from Normandy. They were going to invade France alone. The entire 4th Infantry Division nearly walked into a catastrophe because of a missed radio message. Back at Southwick House, by late morning, the weather has gotten awful. Wind and rain are battering the windows. It's exactly what Stagg predicted. For once, everyone agrees. There was no way the invasion could have happened today. If they'd gone ahead, it would have been a disaster. Stagg's forecast was right. But being right about bad weather isn't the problem. The problem is predicting when good weather will come back. Because now Eisenhower needs to know. Can we go on June 6th? That's the last day in this tide window. If June 6th is bad, they have to wait until July. And waiting until July might mean the Germans figure everything out and the invasion becomes impossible. Stagg and his teams huddle over weather maps throughout June 4th. The storm is raging. But Petterson, the Norwegian on the British team, sees something interesting. Behind this storm, there's a ridge of high pressure building. Weather systems move in patterns. Low pressure brings bad weather. High pressure brings good weather. Between one low pressure system and the next, there's usually a gap, a window. And Petterson thinks there might be a window opening up on June 6th. Not perfect weather, but maybe good enough. The other British meteorologist, Douglas, isn't sure. The Navy guys, Hogben and Wolfe, are skeptical. And Crick, the American, is still insisting his forecast method is superior, and yes, there will definitely be a break in the weather. For once, Crick and the British teams are kind of agreeing, but for totally different reasons. Stagg has to make sense of all this. He's getting data from that single weather ship 600 miles out in the Atlantic. He's getting Maureen Flavin's reports from Black Sod Lighthouse. He's seeing reports from ships in the Irish Sea. He's looking at weather maps drawn every few hours, and he has to figure out whether there's really going to be a 36-hour break in the storm, a break long enough to land 150,000 men and establish a beachhead before the next storm system arrives. Here's what makes this so impossible. In 1944, there are no weather satellites, no computers, no weather radar. Meteorologists are drawing maps by hand based on scattered reports from ships and weather stations. They're trying to predict complex atmospheric behavior days in advance, using basically just intuition and experience. And the Atlantic Ocean is notorious for unpredictable weather. Storms can stall. They can speed up. They can change direction. Trying to forecast Atlantic weather in June 1944 is like trying to predict exactly where a spinning coin will land while it's still in the air. Stagg is under unbelievable pressure. He later writes that if it wasn't fraught with such potential tragedy, the whole situation would be ridiculous. In less than half an hour, he's expected to present to Eisenhower an agreed forecast for the next 5 days, covering the time of launching the greatest military operation ever mounted. And no two of his expert meteorologists can agree on the weather even for the next 24 hours. Afternoon of June 4th. The team meetings get intense. Voices are raised. Petterson is drawing weather maps showing the storm will weaken and move through. Crick is using his historical method and coming to a similar conclusion, but through different logic. The Navy guys are worried about sea conditions. Will the waves calm down enough? Douglas from the Met Office is cautious, but starts to think maybe there's a window. Stagg has to make a call. His gut is telling him Petterson is right. The Norwegian has been good at reading these patterns. If Petterson says there's a window, there might really be a window. But what if Petterson is wrong? What if the storm stalls? What if that high-pressure ridge doesn't build as fast as expected? 4 p.m. meeting with Eisenhower. The weather outside is still terrible. Rain is pounding the windows, wind is howling. But Stagg walks in with cautiously good news. He tells the commanders that since this morning, some rapid and unexpected developments have occurred over the North Atlantic. The storm is starting to break up. Behind it, conditions are improving. On Monday afternoon, June 5th, the weather should start to clear, and on Tuesday, June 6th, they should have a window. Not perfect, not ideal, but workable. Winds dropping to force 3 or 4. Cloud ceiling rising above 3,000 feet. Visibility improving. Seas still rough but manageable. Eisenhower asks the critical question. How long will this window last? Stagg says about 36 hours, maybe a little more. Then another storm system will arrive. So if they go on June 6th, they need to get troops ashore quickly and establish the beachhead before conditions deteriorate again. Now Eisenhower has to decide. The weather will be marginal. Not good, but not terrible. If Stagg is right, they can do this. If Stagg is wrong, if the window doesn't appear or is smaller than predicted, thousands of men could die. And Eisenhower is the one who has to give the order. Admiral Ramsey says he needs to issue warnings to his ships in the next half hour if they're going to launch. Once the ships start moving again, recalling them a second time would be even harder. Some ships wouldn't have enough fuel. The whole operation would fall apart. This is it. Eisenhower has to decide right now. He looks around the room at his commanders. Montgomery says go. He's always aggressive, always wanting to attack regardless of conditions. Ramsey is neutral but willing to commit his ships. Lee Mallory, the air commander, is worried his bombers won't be able to operate effectively, but doesn't want to be the one who stops the invasion. Everyone understands the stakes. Eisenhower sits in silence for a few minutes. Everyone is watching him. The weight of the entire war is on this decision. He's betting everything on a Scottish meteorologist's interpretation of a weather pattern based on incomplete data. Finally, Eisenhower speaks. I don't like it, but there it is. I don't see how we can possibly do anything else. He pauses. Then, I'm quite positive we must give the order. But he wants one more meeting. 4 a.m. on June 5th. One final check. If the forecast still looks good at 4 a.m., they go. If it's changed, they postpone to July. The meeting ends. Messages go out. Prepare to launch on June 6th. But it's conditional. Eisenhower can still change his mind in the early hours of June 5th. Everyone heads to bed to get a few hours of sleep before the final meeting. Except Stagg. He can't sleep. He's going over weather maps again and again, looking for any sign that he's wrong, any indication that the window won't appear. Because if he's wrong, he's just sent 150,000 men to their deaths. The night of June 4th into June 5th is agony for Stagg. Wind is shaking his tent. Rain is hammering down. He writes later that he was almost physically nauseated looking at the weather charts. The storm is still raging. But according to his forecast, by late afternoon on June 5th, it should start clearing. He needs to be right. The whole world needs him to be right. At Blacksod Lighthouse, Maureen Flavin is taking her routine readings. Something has changed. The barometer has stopped falling. It's rising. The wind is still strong, but the pressure is going up. She records the numbers and sends them to Dublin. This is exactly what Stagg's forecast predicted. The storm is passing. The high-pressure ridge is building behind it. 4 a.m. on June 5th, the final meeting. Eisenhower and his commanders are gathered. Everyone looks exhausted. The weather outside is still bad. Eisenhower later writes that wind of almost hurricane proportions is shaking his trailer. It seems impossible that anyone is seriously discussing launching an invasion in these conditions. Stagg walks in. Everyone is watching him. He delivers his forecast. "Gentlemen, some good news. No substantial change has taken place since last time. But as I see it, the little that has changed is in the direction of optimism. The window is still coming. It should last until tomorrow evening. Winds not more than force 4, cloud cover workable, visibility adequate. It's not perfect, but it's enough." Eisenhower polls his commanders one more time. Montgomery is eager to go. Ramsey is ready to commit his ships. Lee Mallory is still worried, but not objecting. Eisenhower considers. He thinks in silence for several minutes. The whole room is holding its breath. At 4:15 a.m., Eisenhower gives the final order. "Okay, we'll go." The room erupts. Officers are cheering, shaking hands. Messages are immediately sent to thousands of ships. The invasion is on. D-Day will be June 6th, 1944. Stagg heads back to his tent. He's exhausted. He's terrified. But he's done his job. Now all he can do is wait and see if his forecast is right. June 5th during the day. Eisenhower is playing checkers in his trailer, trying to stay calm. At noon, he's losing the game. Then he manages a draw. He takes this as a good omen. At 4 p.m., he visits Stagg's office. The sky is still cloudy. The wind is still up. Eisenhower is worried. Has the window arrived yet? Stagg reassures him. By dark tonight, there will be breaks in the clouds. The winds will drop. Everything is on track. That evening, Stagg walks outside. The clouds are starting to break up. Patches of clear sky appear. The wind is dropping from force 6 down to force 4. It's happening. The window is real. His forecast was right. At 9 p.m., Stagg confirms everything to Eisenhower's chief of staff. No change. The forecast holds. The invasion will proceed. That night, paratroopers take off from England. They fly through the remaining clouds toward Normandy. The first men jump at 12:10 a.m. on June 6th. D-Day has begun. June 6th, dawn. The first landing craft hit the beaches at 6:30 a.m. The weather is far from perfect. Clouds are low. Seas are rough. Many landing craft struggle with the waves. Men get seasick. Some craft overturn. But it's manageable. Bombers can see enough to hit some targets. Ships can aim their guns. Most importantly, men get ashore. The invasion is working. By 9 a.m., the BBC announces that Allied forces have landed in northern France. Stagg hears the announcement and feels overwhelming relief. It worked. The window was real. His forecast was right. But he can't celebrate yet because he knows something terrifying. Another storm is coming. The window is closing. The invasion continues throughout June 6th. 150,000 men land on the beaches. Casualties are heavy, especially at Omaha Beach, but the operation is succeeding. By evening, the Allies have established a beachhead. They're in France. They're staying. The invasion worked. In the following days, weather starts to deteriorate again, just as Stagg predicted. Seas get rougher. Clouds thicken. But by then, it doesn't matter. The beachhead is established. Supplies are getting ashore. The Allies are pushing inland. D-Day succeeded. Now here's the terrifying part. Remember how Eisenhower picked June 5th as the original D-Day with June 6th and 7th as backups? If Stagg hadn't postponed from June 5th to June 6th, the invasion would have happened in the middle of that massive storm. It would have been a catastrophe. Thousands would have drowned. Landing craft would have capsized. The invasion would have failed. Stagg's forecast to delay was absolutely critical. But it gets worse. The next possible invasion window with the right tides was June 18th to 20th. If Eisenhower had postponed past June 7th, he would have had to wait until later in the month. On June 17th, all three weather forecasting teams predicted good weather for June 19th and 20th. Perfect invasion weather. They all agreed. For once, there was no argument. If the invasion had been scheduled for June 19th, every meteorologist would have said, go. But on June 18th, the worst storm in 40 years hit the English Channel. It lasted 4 days. Winds reached hurricane force. Waves destroyed the artificial harbors at Normandy. Ships were thrown onto beaches. The storm was so violent it would have made any invasion attempt impossible. If D-Day had been June 19th instead of June 6th, the entire invasion fleet would have been destroyed. Every weather forecaster, including Stagg, would have told Eisenhower to go on June 19th, and it would have been a total disaster. Lawrence Hogben, one of the Navy meteorologists, later said that on June 17th, all 6 of them forecast almost perfect conditions for June 19th. If the invasion had happened then, it would have been a complete catastrophe. They got lucky. The weather on June 6th was barely good enough. The weather on June 19th looked perfect, but would have killed everyone. Sometimes you need luck as much as skill. After D-Day, Stagg returned to relative obscurity. He wasn't celebrated publicly because the weather forecasting operation was classified. For years, nobody knew how close the invasion came to being cancelled or how much it depended on reading the weather correctly. Stagg wrote a book about the experience in 1971 called Forecast for Overlord, but it didn't get much attention. He died in 1975, mostly forgotten by history. Maureen Flavin, the Irish woman who sent the crucial weather reports, didn't even know her readings affected D-Day until the 1950s. She married Ted Sweeney, the lighthouse keeper, and spent the rest of her life in Ireland. In 2020, when she was 97 years old, the United States government finally recognized her contribution. She received a special honor from the House of Representatives. She died in 2023 at age 100. The other meteorologists who worked with Stagg went back to normal careers. Some received medals. Most just resumed their lives. Irving Crick, the American forecaster whose methods everyone criticized, went on to become a successful commercial weather forecaster after the war. He always maintained his techniques were correct. So what do we learn from this story? First, that wars aren't just won by soldiers and generals. They're won by weathermen and lighthouse keepers and people making calculated guesses based on incomplete information. Second, that the biggest decisions in history often come down to individuals under crushing pressure making the best judgment they can with the data they have. And third, that sometimes being right is less about skill and more about being willing to trust your judgment when everyone's life depends on it. Stagg didn't have computers or satellites or modern forecasting tools. He had weather ships, scattered reports, and his gut feeling about atmospheric patterns. He had to synthesize conflicting forecasts from 6 quarreling meteorologists and present a unified prediction to the Supreme Commander. And he had to do it knowing that if he was wrong, he'd be responsible for one of the greatest military disasters in history. He got it right. The window appeared just like he said it would. It lasted just long enough. The invasion succeeded, and because of that, millions of people in Europe were liberated. The war was won. Hitler was defeated. All because a Scottish meteorologist read some weather maps correctly and had the courage to tell Eisenhower to wait one day. Think about that. The entire outcome of World War II, the fate of millions of people, the future of democracy in Europe, all balanced on whether one man's weather forecast was accurate. One wrong guess and history changes completely. Maybe the invasion fails and has to be attempted again later with fewer resources. Maybe Germany develops nuclear weapons first. Maybe the Soviet Union conquers all of Europe instead of just half. Maybe the war drags on for years. We'll never know what would have happened if Stagg had been wrong because he wasn't wrong. He read the weather correctly. He trusted the right meteorologists. He made the right call. And that's why you're hearing this story in English instead of German. Sometimes the most important person in a war isn't the one with the most medals or the highest rank. Sometimes it's the one with the most pressure, making the hardest call with the least certainty. James Stagg was that person. And on June 4th, 1944, when he walked into that room and told Eisenhower the weather would be good enough, he changed the world. If you want another story about World War II, find out about the secret piping project the Allies would have lost the war without.